Welcome back to the channel, you guys. It's your girl, Wicked Raider, coming at you with a part 3 of champions you should not underestimate. So, we're going to be looking at 2 champions in particular, and I want to say both of you guys have the same rank, but definitely give me a different vibe, a different set of feels. As always, if you have not subscribed to the channel, go ahead and hit that subscribe button for me. We finally made it to 100 subscribers, guys. So excited. Thank you to everyone in the comments, everyone that was sending messages like, hey, check your numbers. I think you finally made it. So we did. We got there. We are pushing through, and if nothing else, you're going to notice there's nothing like taking a break and looking a little bit deeper at the champions found in Raid Shadow Legends. So we have been moving around. On average in this series, every single video will at least bring you 2 champions that you may want to stop and take a deeper look at. And I'm going to go to a place that I never thought would hit my favorite list. We're going to come down to the good old Union. We're at the bottom of the champion index. We're going to go to dwarves. Guys, when I tell you I started this game with such a love-hate relationship for dwarves, it was beyond me. But since, based on whichever account I am currently pulling from, I've had a chance to pull Trunda, which she's going to get her own video from an entirely different perspective, which some of you guys may agree or disagree. I'm ready for that one. But that's not who I want to talk about today. The dwarf I want to talk about today is a very close second. I am loving you deep on the inside kind of girl. Guys, I'm talking about my girl, Morag. Morag, I have talked about on this channel before. This is one of those champions, absolutely 10 out of 10, chef's kiss. I love this girl's aesthetic. My girl is given, okay? Let's just put that out there, be a 100% with you on the aesthetic, rocking the hip vibe, little legs and all, thick in the thighs, backdooring. Girl, you better get it. This one is working. I love the colors, love how this uniform is coming together, feeling the braids. You can feel that this champion has showed up, and she doesn't disappoint. Now, these reviews, guys, you've heard me say before, when it comes to reviews, some people love them and live by them, others do not. Morag Brunslock does not disappoint. You have heard it here. Whether you pull her early game, mid game, late game, my girl can serve a purpose. In faction wars, without question, this is one of my go-to. I now have the privilege of saying I have Flyja, I have Trunda, I have Gala Long Braids, all on the same account, and it has changed me as a person. Now, defense champion, not hard to keep alive, which is going to be most important. And if you think about it, as you were pulling through, I've heard this more than once. A lot of people consider the dwarf faction to be actually one of the hardest in the game. There are a lot of champions with some great and unique skills. You hear about them all the time, but there are also a couple of nuances, some little things about these champions that are hidden within their kits that I think we overlook. And so when you're building teams outside of faction wars, outside of arena, you don't often go to the dwarf faction really quickly. But hopefully this video will make you think a little bit differently. So let's look at this kit. Raw Iron Slab attacks one enemy 2 times. Each hit will ignore shield buffs. Each hit will ignore shield buffs. The damage, of course, is based on defense. I can book this out and add an additional 20% of damage to her first skill. Outrage attacks all enemies. And guys, this is where you get a nice smack on a 3-turn cooldown. places a 25% strengthened buff on all allies for 2 turns. The buff will last for 2 turns. The skill is on a 3-turn cooldown when booked. The amount of damage inflicted can be increased by 20%. This is one of those when you hit that early mid to mid game level, the strengthening buffs, the weakening buffs really become important. It's because of these, you're not only running the speed race, but you're also trying to limit the other team, whether it is through turn meter manipulation or the usage of buffs or debuffs. We come to the third skill, Raider Captain teams up with 2 random allies to attack a single enemy. This skill can be incredibly powerful. It allows not only the attack from this champion, so Morag is going to jump in, but teams up with 2 random allies to attack a single enemy. That one enemy is now going to have 3 attacks back to back to back. The allies joining the attack will always use their default skills. If you think about it, depending on what their default skill is, this can still have a team impact, and that's going to be a big one. The skill, of course, can be booked to a 4-turn cooldown. Now, it's appreciated as an epic champion. She is not book heavy. 4 books on the first skill, 3 books on the second, 2 on the third. 9 books total. Not bad. We have seen some people go to the library, take the church, go on vacation, and they're still coming back with books in tow. So overall, Morag gets a point for that as well. Her passive, does not disappoint. Test this might. Counteracts when hit while under a strengthened buff placed by this champion. Now, go back, because remember, the strengthened buff was coming from when placed on all her allies from Outrage. The other thing is, depending on what type of team, guys, it comes down to the team. If you want to start playing around with your teams first, I'll tell you this as a beginner. The first thing I started to do was to either base my team on the first skill in everyone's kit or on their passive. And what that taught me to do, and what it's teaching me to do little by little, is to learn the importance of their skill kit and the turn order of my team. There are a lot of people that still build their teams based solely on position. And sometimes where they're positioned, we get it, is going to be important. But the type of champion that belongs in that position will sometimes be different. So if you have a set pattern, I always have a nuker in slot 1. I always have support in slot 2. I always do HP in slot 3. You're going to run into those bosses and waves where that strategy is not going to be your strongest strategy. You're going to have to move that team around. And don't forget, there are some positions you will need to double up on a particular ability. So the fact that she does have the counterattack is helpful. It also kind of dictates what type of gear I'm more likely to put this champion into. The other thing is she has that rallying cry, so I'm pulling in other allies to aid with my attack. If I have 2 additional nukers on a team with her, or even 1 additional nuker and another champion that could possibly be your support champion, but they have a really great A1, that will make a difference as well. When you're coming back, you have your AoE attack. You're dealing with the strengthened buff. And because she is defense based, she's able to make things happen. Notice also the base speed. So when you're looking at speed wise, she's not the slowest champion that will likely be out there, but she doesn't have to race to be the first to go. And that's kind of nice. You know that you have that backup approach that's going to be present there for you. So extremely helpful there as well. So as we're looking with synergy, guys, with Morag, don't sleep on potential. Now I will run my girl and we will do, let's just do a little comparison and kind of see what numbers she can give. And we'll keep it simple. We'll start Looking for a little speed. So she is an epic champion. Oh, is my girl even on this account? I don't think so. No, she's on my other account. She's on my other account. Guys, I got to do better. I know, I got to do better. So I will have to go back and run her and place that part in there as well. But let's continue because there's one more champion that I most definitely don't want you guys to underestimate. So, rolling back out, we're going to come down to if you have not found at least one champion in the Shadowkin faction that touches your heart, I want you to take a moment. I really want you to slow down, take a moment, and start thinking about your expectations. Guys, some of these champions come in and do the work. I got to be honest, they literally do the work. Love the aesthetic overall. This just cannot go without saying. But we're going to talk about my boy, Gory. Gory is a champion that when I first pulled him, the number one thing I love most about him, are you serious? With the ghost flames, with the hair, my boy is given in some illustrious 3D kind of motion. The Shadowkin background has always represented. Down, baby, to the feet. Do you see the toes and the nails given? It is there. So just looking at him overall, loved it. Just so an epic attack champion, 360 reviews. He's going to kind of hit in the middle. I don't want you to let Arena and Demon Lord throw you off. Guys, when I review champions, these are not two areas I'm looking at. But the majority of you will never struggle in putting together an arena team. The majority of you specifically have champions that at this point in your gameplay, you are likely only using them in arena. There are several of us that probably don't have more than 3 to 4 champions that we use universally in any area of the game. The rest of the champions we are pulling are very specific for very specific areas of the game itself. And that's okay. So if you see where your champion goes from a 4.8 to a 4.2 to a 2.3, I want you to think about how are other players likely using this champion. So he's going to hit 4s in just about every area. A couple of the dens and keeps will be lower. And I actually expected his Hydra scores to be a little bit lower as well. When it comes to Gory, Gory has a kit that creates versatility. It's probably the first word that comes to mind for this particular champion. I will say he's a little bit heavier on the books, but we know the Shadowkin came out last year, not too long ago. And so, or was it the year before? I think it was last year. So the addition of champions as we've been going through has been really, really interesting. So Cold Comfort is going to be the first skill. Attacks one enemy 2 times. Places an extra hit if the target is under a freeze debuff. Ooh, excuse me. We are dealing with the pollen season here. Now, for my account personally, I did not have a lot of champions that utilized or responded to freeze. I have acquired certain gear. I've never geared out a champion necessarily in freeze gear because I just really didn't see the point. Either I had other crowd control champions involved or I just ran a speed race and I was fine. The other thing, the second portion of this will heal this champion by 10% of the damage that's inflicted. So we have a small heal for the champion themselves. We have damage that's being inflicted that can be increased by 20%. And keep in mind, this is your attack-based champion, so they won't have the highest HP. And his speed is average. It's average. So Frost Jutsu. I always said smoke. I should probably change that to ice because those are the vibes his kits are giving. But we come here, we're going to add an additional 5 books. We're going to place Frost Jutsu on a 3-turn cooldown. Attacks 3 times at random. Each hit has a 75% chance of placing a freeze debuff for 1 turn. We've seen the skill. We've seen the skill with a couple of champions that apply that HP burn. We've seen this skill a couple of times with champions that do stun as well. Those two probably come to mind the quickest. Damage can be increased by 10%. The debuff chance can also be increased by an additional 15%. And then, of course, you're bringing this down to a 3-turn cooldown. If each hit has a 75% chance of placing a freeze debuff, and you can get this to a 100% chance of placing a freeze debuff for 1 turn. The skill is on a 3-turn cooldown if fully booked, so you could possibly get to a point where you're going to have that layered effect on an enemy, especially depending on who else is throwing out those debuffs as well. Frostbreaker, 3rd skill, attacks 1 enemy, will ignore increased defense and shield buffs, will also ignore 50% of the target's defense if they are under a freeze debuff. It is pretty likely when you are dealing with this champion on a team, there's going to be a freeze debuff out there almost 100% of the time. Places a counterattack buff and a 50% increased attack buff on this champion for 2 turns if this attack kills an enemy. The third part of the skill, the third skill in this kit, which can be placed on a 3-turn cooldown and have the damage inflicted increased by 20%. The third skill could have done more for me. And as I go through and start reviewing Shadowkin champions, that's likely going to be something you hear from me a couple of times. Most kits for champions within Raid Shadow Legends appear to build as they go. So that first skill is going to be your average, hey, I don't want you to come any closer, keep your distance. You know, it's going to make a small statement. Normally, the second skill is when we start hitting those AoE attacks. If a champion has a continuous heal or a veil or some kind of turn meter control, we're going to see it there. But normally, your third skill is where you are overlaying it and going for the goal. If we attacked more than 1 enemy, it would have been nice. I like the fact that you are ignoring increased defense and shield buffs. I don't necessarily need the love of the freeze, but I know that's connection to your skill set and to your second skill. So that can increase the amount of damage that's inflicted. The counterattack buff and the 50% increase attack buff on this champion for 2 turns if this attack kills an enemy. So it has to be this particular skill, those conditional skills, and this kind of falls under a baby conditional for me, are a little bit heavier for me to see on paper without having that longing to really see it in action. Now, there is a passive, and Dignity gets a little in-depth. So counteracts with the Cold Comfort skill whenever an enemy places a stun, sleep, freeze, provoke, fear, true fear, or petrification debuff on any ally. What this passive does for Gory is it most definitely tells you if you have an opponent that is able to do stun, sleep, freeze, provoke, fear, true fear, or petrification, I am the champion for you. If you are dealing with a champion with an increase, decrease attack, if they are dealing with increase or decrease speed or a weaken or a strengthen, anything on that side, that's not going to be my biggest bank to pull from. So sometimes you're going to use their passive to figure out what type of team this champion would be best fit for. Now, to give you a little context when it comes to this particular champion, because he is an epic champion. So we'll start kind of simple and we'll run my boy. Now, I do have Gory on this team. I'm like, I know I have Gory somewhere. I had Finchy, but Finchy is on another account. So I was going to run those two side by side. And I want to run somebody actually with a similar kit to his. Let's run Ultimate Galek only because they're not very far apart from one another, skill wise. So just kind of give you an overall idea. We remember when we ran Ultimate Galek next to Relic Keeper, and Relic Keeper being the fusionable champion. The number one thing we noticed was the amount of damage that was being done, the amount of strength when it came to the overall attack is where I wanted to see the most change. So Gory is already down. Ultimate Galek is still going. He's going to boost his own turn meter. He's taken out the Verges, which this third wave will normally take him out. May impress me, but normally that third wave is going to take him out. And remember, Ultimate Galek was one of those where he's another example of I need to be re-geared, but really good for things like this. The amount of attack power I am not impressed with. It's one of those. So, and you can notice the difference and the ascension level difference as well. We come here with defense. He's going to hold his own, but the support is not really comparable. So if I'm looking at Gory in comparison to Ultimate Galek in this particular fight, I would definitely go with another champion. Now, if I compare him, for example, Epic to Epic. So we have Relic Keeper. We'll go ahead and put Relic Keeper in front. So we're going to run these two to kind of give you a comparison just based on the previous video. So when I am looking at both of these champions in particular, the speed of Gory can be helpful. Now, I have run him on teams that have a speed aura, number one. If you have a Belor, for example, if you have an Eris, for those of us that are still running those rare champions, you saw that second skill where he's going in with those multiple attacks. And the speed with which he is doing it is awesome. If you have Kenoichi, for example, if you have, there is one more. Not Genbo. Not Torg the Frog is another one who came to mind. There's another champion, and I will look for them so that I can let you know. And notice these two together. He's a different kind of champion depending on who he is next to. So when he is not, for example, next to Galek, so he wasn't in first position, and I'll actually run him again next to Galek. You can see the difference in the amount of damage that's provided. So even though the lack of aura skill is going to be there, you get the feeling of what he's able to do overall. Another way to look at it, let's say I take that champion out and I want to compare you to, let's see, let's do Stick Track. Oh, you know that this champion is one of my favorites. The presence of that aura is going to be a big one. These two together will often make a pretty good team as well. I will put a support champion between the two. I will often add one more nuker or another champion that throws a really good debuff, and that will make a pretty good difference for me. If you have a Verges on your team, if you have any other support like or defense based support champion that's able to absorb some of the attack, Gory would serve well on that particular type of team as well. If you are running a Ronda and a Deliana, you're running someone with a pretty impressive AoE. He does really well there because he will also call on those particular champions to participate with his other skill level. So he's already gone down. The rest of the damage is going to be done by Stick Track from this point forward. He'll acquire all of those points. And he should be able to finish this one. Yeah. There we go. So really quick, not bad on time, a little bit doubled. But you're going to notice since he went down a little bit early, the comparison is going to hit really differently. So which aura he's placed next to is pretty important. I want to show him with someone that has a speed aura and nobody has one. So let's do one more. I sometimes run him with Ronda. That's another champion type that we kind of benefit from as well. There are some champions that serve as um, really good counter attack allies. So when they go in for, it's almost like their retaliation spirit. It's pretty nice to have because they were often attacked several times. He'll make it to the third battle here. He'll do a small heal on himself, but he won't survive more than 2 attacks at that level. He goes down, and she's normally able to finish this one off. But by far, you notice that he ran quicker with Relic Keeper than any other champion. If they have that increased speed, if they have anything like that, boom, she got that one in. Kind of shocked. So he's not going to be a earth-changing, shattering kind of guy, but depending on who you have him with, and what you're trying to accomplish, it's going to make a huge difference. Again, if you are only running, for example, you have Ultimate Death Knight, you really don't have a good support around him, Gory can come in and do additional support there as well, because you have that champion that is able to absorb some of the damage that he otherwise would not be able to handle. Now with Gory, what I would do at this point is I will go back in and re-gear him, looking especially on the chest and on the gauntlet, to kind of see what numbers and what percentages I have there. It's always my first stop to go back and re-gear champions. I probably look at re-gearing maybe once a month, every 6 weeks. I try to go in and kind of scramble up my teams a little bit, and that forces me to go in and to do a little extra work. Notice with Relic Keeper will go down, he'll continue to work, and his speed alone and the way he responds is so much more impressive depending on the aura that's supporting him. So he's going to finish that one off. Again, here, it's all about what difference and what support is going to be provided. So, guys, every champion that you come into contact with will obviously lead you to a different place. So you can see just regular gear, relentless set, speed set, average ring from CVC. That's all we're working with right now. Nothing is 16th level, nothing is maxed, just working this guy. So between Gory and Morag, 2 champions you definitely want to slow down and take a look at. A little niche in some categories, but can surely be worth it. If you have stayed around this long, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We try to go in and actually post a couple of times a week, just giving you a few updates on the game itself. And of course, taking a look at some champions that may be hanging out in your vaults that should be a little bit more active on your account. If you have not joined a clan, 22WK, we definitely have those slots available for you. And as always, guys, happy gaming.